The edge of the forest was Elias's favorite post. From here, he could see both worlds. The dead one beyond the tree line, a wasteland of crumbling concrete and twisted metal, and the living one behind him, where the last humans cultivated their fragile existence. Sanctuary. The name was both literal and symbolic, a reminder of what they protected and why. Elias adjusted the rifle slung across his back, its weight familiar after 15 years of guard duty. He'd been 16 when they first handed him a weapon, taught him where to aim, how to shoot. Now, at 31, he was head of security for the eastern perimeter, responsible for 20 guards and 5 miles of boundary between Sanctuary and whatever lurked beyond. The setting sun cast long shadows through the trees, painting the forest floor in patches of gold and darkness. Soon, night would fall, and the real work would begin. That's when they came, if they came at all. The outsiders, as the council called them, twisted things that had once been human, warped by disease and radiation after the collapse. At least, that's what they had been told. "Perimeter check," a voice crackled through Elias's earpiece. It was Mira, his second in command, running through the evening protocols. "East post clear," Elias responded, scanning the darkening horizon one last time before turning to walk the boundary. Routine was safety. Routine kept everyone alive. The path back to the compound was well worn, maintained carefully to ensure quick evacuations if necessary. Not that they'd ever needed one. In 15 years, no real threat had breached the outer perimeter, just the occasional wild animal. Sometimes Elias wondered if the outsiders were just stories told to keep people from wandering too far. The main gates of Sanctuary loomed ahead, 12 feet of reinforced metal embedded in a wall twice that height. The wall itself encircled nearly 100 acres of farmland, housing, and the central complex where the council lived and worked. It was an impressive feat of engineering, built by the first generation of survivors almost 60 years ago. "You're late," said the guard at the gate, a young man named Thomas, whose father had served with Elias years before. "Checking the south ridge," Elias replied, though in truth, he'd lingered at the edge of the forest longer than necessary. There was something about watching the sun set over the ruins that brought him peace, a reminder that even after destruction, beauty remained. Thomas nodded, punching a code into the panel beside him. The gates parted with a groan of metal, revealing the settlement within. Sanctuary was a mosaic of old and new, repurposed shipping containers converted into homes, gardens climbing up trellises made from scavenged materials, solar panels glinting atop nearly every structure. At the center stood the only building predating the collapse, a massive concrete structure that had once been a research facility, now serving as Sanctuary's heart. Home to approximately 300 people. It was all that remained of humanity, or so they believed. "Council meeting tonight," Tomas added as Elias passed through. "Dr. Ward was asking for you." Elias felt a flicker of unease. Council meetings were rare, and Dr. Ward, the head of medical research, rarely requested his presence specifically. Still, he nodded and continued down the central path, greeting residents as he passed. Children played in a communal garden while adults harvested vegetables for the evening meal. A normal evening in Sanctuary. Peaceful, protected. Yet as Elias approached the central facility, that sense of unease grew stronger. The central building, simply called the complex, housed the medical facilities, laboratories, and council chambers. Unlike the makeshift homes surrounding it, the complex was pristine, maintained with resources that could have improved living conditions elsewhere in Sanctuary. Elias had always found this strange but never questioned it openly. Armed guards stood at the entrance, more heavily equipped than the perimeter patrols. They nodded at Elias, stepping aside to let him enter. The interior was a stark contrast to the rustic community outside, sterile white corridors illuminated by harsh fluorescent lighting. air thick with the scent of disinfectant. "Elias," a voice called from down the hall. Dr. Sarah Ward approached, her white coat immaculate, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. At 55, she was one of the oldest residents of Sanctuary, having been just a child when the collapse occurred. "Thank you for coming promptly. You asked for me?" Elias kept his voice neutral. Dr. Ward was respected but not particularly liked. She headed both the medical division and the council, which gave her almost unchecked authority in Sanctuary. "Yes, there's a matter of security we need to discuss." She gestured for him to follow, leading him deeper into the complex than he usually ventured. They passed laboratories where technicians in protective gear worked with equipment Elias couldn't name. They entered a small conference room where the other council members waited. Director Matthews, head of agriculture, Director Collins, in charge of engineering, and Director Patel, who oversaw population and resources. They all looked up as Elias entered, their expressions grave. "Sit," Dr. Ward instructed, indicating a chair at the far end of the table. Elias complied, increasingly uncomfortable. Council meetings were typically held in the community hall, not this sterile back room. "There's been an incident," Director Matthews began, his weathered face creased with concern. "Something approached the western perimeter last night." Elias frowned. "Why wasn't I informed? I'm head of security." "It was unusual," Dr. Ward interjected. "Not like the animal encounters we typically see. The guards reported a figure, humanoid but not quite human. It observed our defenses for several minutes before disappearing back into the forest." "An outsider?" Elias asked, though he'd begun to doubt their existence years ago. "Perhaps," Dr. Ward's gaze was calculating, "but unlike any we've documented before. This one seemed purposeful, intelligent. We're increasing security on all perimeters," Director Collins added. "Starting tonight." Elias nodded, though questions swirled in his mind. "I'll arrange additional patrols, but why the secrecy? Why not inform everyone to be on alert?" A silence fell over the room. The council members exchanged glances. "We don't want to cause panic," Dr. Ward finally said. "The community is stable, productive. Fear would disrupt that." It was a reasonable explanation, yet Elias sensed there was more they weren't telling him. Still, he knew better than to press further. The council's decisions were final, and questioning them too openly could be seen as undermining authority, a serious offense in Sanctuary's strict social hierarchy. "I understand," he said, rising from his chair. "I'll organize the additional security personally. One more thing," Dr. Ward said as he turned to leave. "If you encounter this visitor, do not engage. Report its location and withdraw. Under no circumstances are you to interact with it." Elias paused at the door. "Even if it threatens Sanctuary?" Dr. Ward's expression hardened. "Especially then. We have protocols for such situations that go beyond conventional security." With that cryptic statement, Elias was dismissed. As he walked back through the complex, the unease that had been building since his arrival crystallized into something sharper. In 15 years of service, he'd never been given an order not to defend Sanctuary. It went against everything he'd been trained to do. Outside, night had fallen completely. The community spaces were empty as residents retreated to their homes for the evening meal. Elias headed for the security barracks. Mind racing. Something about the council's behavior felt wrong. If there was a genuine threat, why keep it secret? And what protocols was Dr. Ward referring to? The barracks were a long, low building near the eastern wall, housing the unmarried members of the security team. Elias had his own quarters as head of security, a small but private room at the end of the main dormitory. Inside, he found Mira waiting, her expression tense. "You heard?" she asked without preamble. Elias closed the door behind him. About the western perimeter? Yes. The council just informed me. Mira lowered her voice. There's more. Wren was on duty last night. He said it wasn't just watching. It tried to communicate. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. Communicate how? Gestures, like it was trying to signal someone inside Sanctuary. Mira's dark eyes were wide with concern. Wren reported it to Director Collins directly. That's why the council called their meeting. And they didn't mention this part to me, Elias murmured, more to himself than to Mira. Interesting. What do you think it means? Mira asked. Elias considered his response carefully. Mira was loyal, but he wasn't sure how much to share of his growing suspicions. I'm not sure, but I intend to find out. Double the patrols tonight, especially on the western perimeter, and tell the team to report anything unusual directly to me, not to the council. Mira raised an eyebrow but nodded. She'd been with the security team almost as long as Elias and knew when not to ask questions. Consider it done. After she left, Elias removed his rifle and began disassembling it for cleaning, a ritual that helped him think. The council was hiding something. That much was clear. But what and why? In all his years in Sanctuary, he'd never had reason to question the leadership. They maintained order, ensured survival. Without them, the last remnants of humanity might have perished long ago. Yet now doubt crept in like a shadow. When his weapon was cleaned and reassembled, Elias made a decision. Tonight, he would take the western perimeter patrol himself. If this visitor returned, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. The western forest was denser than the eastern boundary, the trees growing closer to the wall. It made visibility poor, which was why they typically assigned more guards to this section. Tonight, however, Elias had arranged to patrol alone, sending the regular guards to reinforce other areas. The night was clear, a half-moon providing just enough light to navigate without using his flashlight. Elias moved silently along the perimeter, eyes scanning the darkness between the trees. For hours, nothing moved except nocturnal animals going about their business. Then, just past midnight, he saw it. A flicker of movement too deliberate to be wildlife. Elias froze, watching as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was humanoid, as the council had described, but there was something strange about its movements, too fluid, almost graceful. It approached the wall slowly, stopping about 50 yards from where Elias stood concealed in the shadows. In the moonlight, he could make out more details. It wore clothes, actual clothes, not the rags you'd expect from a radiation-warped survivor. Its form was slender but unmistakably human, and when it tilted its head up to examine the wall, Elias caught a glimpse of its face. Not deformed, not monstrous, human. The figure raised a hand, making a series of gestures toward the top of the wall where a security camera was mounted. It was clearly a signal, just as Wren had reported. Elias's mind raced. Everything they'd been told about the outside world, about the outsiders, seemed suddenly questionable. He should report this immediately. But Dr. Ward's warning echoed in his mind. Do not engage. Before he could decide on a course of action, the figure turned sharply, as if sensing his presence. For a moment, they stared at each other across the distance, and Elias felt a jolt of recognition, though he couldn't possibly know this person. Then the figure was gone, melting back into the forest with that same unnatural grace. Elias remained motionless, processing what he'd seen. That was no irradiated monster. That was a person, healthy, intelligent, and apparently trying to communicate with someone inside Sanctuary, which meant either the council was wrong about what existed beyond their walls, or they were lying. Neither possibility boded well. Dawn found Elias still at his post, mind churning with questions. When his relief arrived, he returned to Sanctuary with a carefully neutral expression, reporting that the night had passed without incident. It was the first time he'd ever lied in an official report. But instinct told him to keep what he'd seen to himself, at least until he understood more. The day passed in a haze of routine duties and private speculation. Elias observed the council members as they went about their business, looking for any sign that might confirm his suspicions. Dr. Ward spent most of her time in the restricted section of the complex, while the others seemed unusually tense, holding whispered conversations that stopped whenever anyone approached. That evening, instead of returning to the barracks after his shift, Elias made his way to the archives, a small room in the complex that housed what remained of humanity's written knowledge. Access was restricted, but as head of security, he had clearance for most areas. The archivist, an elderly man named Leon, looked up in surprise as Elias entered. "Commander Jensen, don't often see you in here." "Research," Elias said with a casual smile. "Council asked me to review some of the early security protocols, thinking of updating them." Leon nodded, seemingly accepting the explanation. "Let me know if you need help finding anything." Elias browsed the shelves, uncertain what exactly he was looking for. The archives contained technical manuals, medical texts, and historical records salvaged after the collapse. Most residents never bothered with them, focused as they were on day-to-day survival. He selected several volumes on the founding of Sanctuary and settled at a table in the corner. The official history was familiar, how a group of scientists and military personnel had established the settlement after the collapse, creating a safe haven as the outside world deteriorated. Generations had lived and died here, maintaining humanity's last outpost. But as Elias read deeper, inconsistencies emerged, references to the project without explanation, mentions of subjects and control groups that didn't fit the narrative of desperate survivors, and most troublingly, gaps in the records, entire years with minimal documentation. "Finding what you need?" Leon asked, appearing beside him. Elias looked up, careful to keep his expression neutral. "Mostly, I'm curious about the early days, just after the founding. There seem to be some gaps." Leon's eyes darted to the door before he replied. Voice lowered. "Some records were lost during the power failures in the first decade. Others..." He hesitated. "Others are kept elsewhere." "Elsewhere?" "Level B, restricted archives." Leon straightened some papers on the desk, not meeting Elias's gaze. "Council access only." Level B was the basement level of the complex, off limits to everyone except the council and certain medical staff. Elias had always assumed it contained sensitive research or perhaps emergency supplies. The idea that it housed hidden records sent a chill through him. "I see," he said carefully. "Thank you, Leon." The old man nodded, then leaned closer. "Be careful what questions you ask, Commander. Some answers aren't worth the cost." Before Elias could respond, Leon shuffled away, leaving him with a growing sense of dread. The archivist's warning only confirmed what he already suspected. There were secrets in Sanctuary, dangerous ones. Night fell, and Elias returned to the western perimeter. He told no one where he was going, using his authority to assign himself a solitary patrol. If the visitor returned, he wanted to be there. And this time, he had questions. Hours passed with no sign of activity. The forest remained still, illuminated only by moonlight filtered through the canopy. Elias was beginning to think the figure wouldn't return when a soft sound caught his attention, not from the forest, but from above. He looked up just in time to see a dark shape scaling the outer wall of Sanctuary. The figure moved with practiced ease, using handholds invisible from below. It reached the top and paused, silhouetted against the night sky. Elias raised his rifle instinctively, then lowered it. This was his chance to learn the truth. He whispered into his radio, "Possible breach at Western Wall. Section 6. Hold positions and await my signal." It would keep the other guards at a distance while he investigated. The figure descended the inner side of the wall, landing with barely a sound on sanctuary soil. It stood still for a moment, seemingly orienting itself, then began moving purposefully toward the complex. Elias followed at a distance, using the shadows for cover. The intruder moved with confidence, avoiding the regular patrol routes as if they were known in advance. It reached the complex and slipped inside through a service entrance, one that should have been locked and alarmed. This was beyond concerning. Not only had an outsider breached their defenses, but they appeared to have intimate knowledge of Sanctuary's security systems. Elias hesitated at the entrance, torn between following the intruder and calling for backup. In the end, curiosity won. He entered the complex, weapon ready but not raised. The service corridor was dark, emergency lights casting just enough of a glow to navigate by. Elias moved silently, ears straining for any sound that might reveal the intruder's location. A soft metallic clang from ahead gave him direction, the sound of the stairwell door closing. They were heading down, to level B. Elias quickened his pace, reaching the stairwell and carefully pulling open the door. The stairs descended into darkness, but he could hear faint footsteps below. Drawing his sidearm, quieter than the rifle, he began to descend. Level B was even darker than the service corridor, the air noticeably cooler and tinged with a chemical smell. Elias paused at the bottom of the stairs, allowing his eyes to adjust. The layout was unfamiliar, a long hallway with doors on either side, stretching into darkness. A sliver of light caught his attention. One of the doors ahead was ajar. Elias approached cautiously, every sense alert for danger. As he neared, he could hear voices, hushed but intense. One belonged to the intruder, he assumed. The other was distressingly familiar. "Dr. Ward." "Running out of time," the unknown voice was saying, its tone urgent. "They're getting suspicious. The pattern is repeating." "We have it under control," Dr. Ward replied. "The preparations are nearly complete." "And what about the others?" "They deserve to know. No one can know until we're ready. You've risked too much coming here." Elias moved closer to the door, straining to hear more, but his foot caught on something metal, a tool left in the hallway. It clattered loudly in the silence. The voices inside went quiet immediately. Elias raised his weapon, bracing for confrontation, but before he could move, something struck him from behind. Pain exploded at the base of his skull, and darkness closed in. He woke to bright light and the sound of machines beeping. For a moment, he thought he was in the medical bay, but as his vision cleared, he realized he was still in level B. He lay strapped to a medical table in what appeared to be a laboratory, far more advanced than anything he'd seen in Sanctuary before. "He's awake," someone said. Director Patel moved into his field of vision, looking concerned but not hostile. "Untie him," came Dr. Ward's voice from somewhere behind him. "He's seen too much already. Might as well see it all." The restraints were removed, and Elias sat up slowly, head pounding. Dr. Ward stood nearby, along with a stranger, the intruder, he presumed, up close. There was nothing unusual about them. Just a person, maybe in their 30s, dressed in functional clothes that weren't so different from what people wore in Sanctuary. "Who are you?" Elias demanded, looking at the stranger. "My name is Lyra," she replied. "I'm from the Eastern Coalition." "The what?" Dr. Ward sighed heavily. "There's a lot you don't know. Commander Jensen, a lot we've kept from everyone." "I'm starting to realize that," Elias said coldly. "Maybe you should start explaining." Dr. Ward exchanged a glance with Lyra, then nodded. "Very well. But understand that what I'm about to tell you changes everything, not just for you, but for everyone in Sanctuary." She gestured around the laboratory. "This facility wasn't built after the collapse. It was built before, by a research group called Nexus. They were developing technology that they believed would be the next step in human evolution, nanotechnology that could integrate with human biology, enhancing everything from immune response to cognitive function. "What does this have to do with Sanctuary?" Elias asked, though a sick feeling in his stomach suggested he already knew. "Sanctuary isn't what you think it is," Lyra interjected. "It was never about protecting the last humans from a destroyed world. It was about isolating test subjects for long-term study." The words hit Elias like a physical blow. "Test subjects," he repeated. "Us, we're the test subjects." Dr. Ward at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. The original researchers believed they were doing something necessary, creating humans who could survive environmental collapse, disease, radiation. The nano-integration program was seen as humanity's best hope. "And the collapse?" Elias asked. "Was that real, or just another lie?" "It happened," Lyra said. "But not the way you've been told. It wasn't total. Humanity survived, adapted. There are settlements all over what used to be North America. The Eastern Coalition is the largest, with over 10,000 people." Elias struggled to process this information. Everything he'd believed, everything he'd fought to protect, was based on deception. "So the outsiders are just people," Dr. Ward finished for him. "People trying to make contact, trying to understand what we're doing here." "What are you doing here?" Elias demanded, anger finally breaking through the shock. "Experimenting on us without our knowledge? For generations?" Dr. Ward moved to a computer terminal and brought up a series of images, microscopic views of what looked like cells, but with tiny mechanical structures integrated into them. "The nano-integration was successful," she said. "More successful than the original researchers ever imagined. Everyone born in Sanctuary has the nanotechnology in their cells. It's why we don't get sick, why injuries heal faster, why our lifespans are longer than they should be given our limited resources." "You're saying we're, what, not human?" "Enhanced human," Dr. Ward corrected. "The culmination of the project. But there's a problem. The system is breaking down," Lyra said. "The nanotech is evolving, becoming something the original designers never intended. In some subjects, it's causing changes." "Changes?" Elias repeated. Dr. Ward's expression was grim. "Cognitive alterations, personality shifts, and in some cases, physical transformations. It started with the third generation. We've been able to manage it with targeted treatments. But you're losing control," Elias finished, the pieces falling into place. "That's why you've been so concerned about security lately. Not because you're afraid of what's out there, but because you're afraid of what's in here." "Yes," Dr. Ward admitted. "There are individuals in Sanctuary who are further along in the transformation process. We've been containing them, studying them, trying to reverse the changes." "Containing them where?" Elias asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Here, Level B has more than just laboratories." A cold rage filled Elias. "Show me." After a moment of hesitation, Dr. Ward nodded. She led him deeper into Level B, past more laboratories, storage rooms, until they reached a heavily secured door. Beyond it was a corridor lined with cells, not crude prison cells, but what looked like medical isolation rooms. Each had a large observation window, and through them, Elias could see people. Sanctuary residents he recognized. People who had supposedly left for other duties or died from accidents. They were changed, just as Dr. Ward had described. Some in subtle ways, unusual patterns on their skin, eyes that seemed to glow faintly. Others more dramatically, altered proportions, extra appendages, features that seemed almost fluid rather than fixed. "This is what you've been hiding," Elias said, voice hollow. "These people, our people. We're trying to help them, Dr. Ward insisted. The changes are accelerating. Soon, they won't be recognizable as human at all. And it's spreading. More people are showing early signs every month. Including you, Commander Jensen, Director Patel said quietly. Elias turned to stare at him. What? Your night vision, your reflexes. Haven't you noticed they're better than they used to be? Better than they should be? Director Patel's expression was sympathetic. You're in the early stages. Elias thought back to his patrol. How clearly he'd seen Lyra in the darkness. How aware he'd been of every sound, every movement in the forest. He'd attributed it to experience, to years of training. But what if it was something else? What happens now? He asked, voice tight with suppressed emotion. That depends on you, Lyra said. I came here to offer help. The Eastern Coalition has resources, scientific knowledge that could help manage this situation, but the Council has been resistant to outside interference. We've contained the situation for 60 years, Dr. Ward said defensively. We've preserved what's left of the original human genome while studying the evolution of the enhanced line. You've kept people prisoner, Elias countered. You've lied to everyone in Sanctuary about who they are, what they are. You've denied them choice. To protect them, Dr. Ward argued. Do you think the outside world would welcome them if they knew? They'd be feared, hunted, or worse, exploited for the technology they carry in their cells. The Coalition isn't like that, Lyra interjected. We've evolved too, just in different ways. Technology, society, we've rebuilt, and we need what Sanctuary has learned about adaptation. Elias looked between them, then back at the changed residents in their cells. Each one had been someone he knew, a neighbor, a colleague, a friend. Now they were specimens, locked away because they no longer fit the Council's definition of human. What would your help look like? He asked Lyra. Collaboration, open exchange of information, and, eventually, integration. Sanctuary can't sustain itself indefinitely, especially not with the nano-evolution accelerating. The Coalition has space, resources, and genetic diversity that could help stabilize the process. And the people here? The ones already changing? Lyra's expression softened. They would be free. Different, yes, but free. We believe they represent a possible future for humanity. One path of many we might take as a species. Dr. Ward made a noise of protest, but Elias silenced her with a look. You've had 60 years to fix this, and you've failed. You've just hidden the evidence of your failure in these cells. He turned back to Lyra. I want to see it, the Coalition, before I make any decisions. Lyra nodded. I can arrange that, but it means leaving Sanctuary, possibly for good. The Council won't easily forgive such a breach. Let me worry about that, Elias said. His mind was made up. He'd dedicated his life to protecting Sanctuary, to preserving what he thought was the last of humanity. Now he knew it had all been based on lies. When? Tonight, Lyra said. There's a team waiting beyond the western perimeter. They can get us to Coalition territory within a day. Dr. Ward stepped forward, expression hard. This is treason, Commander. You took an oath to protect Sanctuary. I took an oath to protect its people. Elias corrected her. And that's exactly what I intend to do. He gestured to the cells. Starting with them. For a moment, it seemed Dr. Ward might call for security. But instead, her shoulders sagged slightly. You don't understand what you're risking. The nano-evolution is unpredictable. Those who are further along, they're changing in ways we never anticipated, developing abilities we can't explain. All the more reason they shouldn't be locked up like specimens, Elias said. They deserve the chance to determine their own futures. The standoff might have continued, but an alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Director Patel rushed to a nearby terminal. Breach at the eastern perimeter, he reported. Multiple intruders. Coalition, Elias asked Lyra. She shook her head, looking concerned. No, we only have the team at the western edge. Dr. Ward's face went pale. It's happening. They've come back. Who? Elias demanded. The original Nexus researchers, Dr. Ward said. Or rather, their descendants. They've found us before, tried to reclaim the project. We've always managed to repel them, but they're persistent. Elias processed this new information quickly. How many guards know about Level B, about what's really happening here? Just the senior security team, Director Patel said. 6 people, including you. Then we need to tell everyone the truth. Elias decided. Now, before this turns into a bloodbath, if these people are here for the nanotechnology, they're here for all of us, not just those in the cells. Dr. Ward looked ready to object, but Lyra cut in. He's right. Secrecy won't protect Sanctuary anymore. These people need to know what they're fighting for and against. After a moment's hesitation, Dr. Ward nodded. Very well. But I warn you, the truth may cause more problems than it solves. Elias was already moving toward the exit. I'll take that chance. Lyra, contact your team. Tell them we need support at the eastern perimeter. Dr. Ward, release those people. He pointed to the cells. They're part of Sanctuary, too. They deserve the chance to defend it. Within the hour, Sanctuary was transformed. The alarm had brought everyone to the central gathering area, where Elias, flanked by Dr. Ward and the rest of the council, revealed the truth. There was shock, anger, disbelief. But as the reality of the external threat sank in, a strange unity formed. The released captives from Level B joined them, their altered appearances causing initial fear that quickly gave way to fascination and then acceptance as family members and friends recognized them despite their changes. Elias organized the defense, integrating Lyra's coalition team when they arrived. The Nexus descendants, well-armed and clearly determined, breached the outer wall but were met with unified resistance. The battle was brief but intense, with both sides using technology Elias had never seen before. What turned the tide, in the end, were the changed residents. Those furthest along in the nano-evolution displayed abilities that defied explanation, enhanced strength, impossible speed, and in some cases, what could only be described as direct control over electronic systems. The Nexus forces retreated, but Elias knew they would return with greater numbers. In the aftermath, as the injured were treated and the damage assessed, the people of Sanctuary gathered again to decide their future. The vote was not unanimous, but the majority chose to accept Lyra's offer to leave Sanctuary and join the Eastern Coalition, bringing with them their unique adaptations and the knowledge gained from 60 years of isolation. The evacuation began the following day. It would take time to relocate everyone, especially those who needed special accommodations due to their transformations. Elias oversaw the security arrangements, working closely with Lyra to ensure safe passage through the wilderness between Sanctuary and Coalition territory. On the final day, as the last group prepared to depart, Elias stood once more at his favorite spot on the eastern perimeter. The sun was setting, painting the ruins beyond in gold and shadow, just as it had countless times before. But now he knew those ruins weren't the end of the world, just the end of one chapter in humanity's story. Ready? Lyra asked, joining him at the edge of the forest. Elias looked back at Sanctuary, the walls that had protected and imprisoned them, the complex where the truth had been hidden for generations. Then he looked down at his hands, noticing for the first time a faint pattern emerging beneath the skin, like circuitry etched in silver. Yes, he said, turning away from the past and toward whatever future awaited them. I'm ready. Behind them, Sanctuary stood empty, no longer the last bastion of humanity, but perhaps the first outpost of whatever humanity was becoming.